Hello and welcome to the JDI Experience episode of the HAWKS podcast. Today I'm joined by Lincoln.
Hi.
I'm joined by Mr. Swanson.
Hello.
And today we'll be talking about the moon landing and common misconceptions about it. So, as a brief explanation for what the moon landing is, in July 1969, NASA launched Apollo 11 with 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. After traveling for 4 days, Armstrong and Aldrin landed in the lunar module Eagle on the moon's surface July 20th, 1969. While Collins stayed in orbit of the command module, Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon, famously saying, "It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Aldrin joined him shortly after. They spent around 2.5 hours collecting rock samples, taking photos, and setting up scenic experiments for NASA back home. After returning on the spaceship, the crew safely traveled to Earth, splashing down on the Pacific July 24th, 1969. So, Lincoln, do you think the moon landing's real?
I do think the moon landing's real.
Do you think the moon landing's real, Swanson?
Well, I think when you introduced it, the big misconception was that it actually happened, Jesse. No, I'm not necessarily saying the moon landing isn't real. However, if it came out tomorrow that it was faked, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised.
So, the first theory we're going to break down today is the moon landing was faked on a movie set. So what would you say about that?
Well, space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement, to quote the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And supposedly Stanley Kubrick did it, using the same technology used to make 2001: A Space Odyssey. My take on it is very simple, right? I like to believe that it happened. I see no definitive evidence that it didn't, though I do see a lot of circumstantial evidence that can call it into question. However, here, when you look at it objectively, right, we had a martyred president at the height of the Cold War, right? Kennedy said that we will land on the moon by the end of the decade, and we literally squeezed it in with months left, in July of 1969. It's the heart of the Cold War. Communist Russia was beating us, and we kind of had to. And I have a life philosophy that there's nothing about life that can't be learned, gained, or understood from Star Wars or The Simpsons, but I extend that a little bit to comedian Chris Rock, and he had a joke in an old bit that said, "You mean to tell me we can build a space shuttle, fly around the moon, but you can't build a Pinto where the bumper doesn't fall off?" It seems to me that if we landed on the moon nearly 60 years ago, shouldn't we be much further along technologically than we are?
So what do you think when people say the moon landing was filmed on a movie set, Lincoln?
I guess I truly can't disprove that, but I don't think there's any evidence that actually points to it was on a movie set. I know that I don't know exactly how this works, but you can take these big fancy lasers and you can shoot one at the moon because they put up these reflective things that prove that we were up there. You shoot it and it'll come back and hit. So we were at least there at one point.
So
did man put them there, or did a rover put them there?
I'm pretty sure it was during the moon landing.
I'm pretty sure. Okay, my counter argument to that would be, and again, there are, and I'm not by no means a specialist on this or anything like that, but I know one of the conspiracy theories is where you look at different pictures and you overlay them, and there's supposed to be different parts of the surface, the lunar surface, and rocks line up exactly, ridge lines line up exactly, with just the slightest little bit of a tilt. And it's one of the oldest movie tricks in the book where, you just change the angle on the same.
So from the theories I've looked up, here's what supposedly debunks it. Thousands of engineers and scientists worked on Apollo, and keeping a secret with that big would be nearly impossible. And then also that independent observers, including the Soviet Union arrival at the time, tracked the mission. And moon rocks were brought back, not found on Earth.
I would never argue that we haven't been on the moon in terms of we haven't been able to send something to the moon. We've obviously sent rovers to Mars. So I think that is something that you can't really dispute. And we obviously had the technology in the 60s. We began developing the technology pretty quickly after World War II.
Right.
And that's basically why I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person to have this counterpoint on, because I'm not someone that emphatically says we did not land on the moon. I am, however, someone that believes there's enough circumstantial evidence and social pressures given the time period in which it happened that I could not say I'd be even remotely surprised if it came out definitively that we actually did not. So I'll play the devil's advocate and take the argument that we
Yeah.
did not land on the moon, which isn't necessarily like my
Right.
very strong held belief. But I do certainly appreciate arguments
Right.
as to why. And I think that you cannot deny that technologically our reach has reached the moon. But, that would certainly explain the flag, the reflectors, things like that. And especially when we've been to Mars since then. So obviously if we've been to Mars,
Right.
we've certainly been to the moon. The argument would be, did man actually step foot on the moon in July of 1969?
So speaking about the flag, next theory I have is the American flag waves, so there must be wind. What do you think about that?
There's obviously no wind on the
And
moon.
it
It's
waves when they're like
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah, it
That's-
needs some kind of force behind it to begin it to wave,
Yeah.
but that force doesn't exist naturally in
Yeah.
space.
So the debunked is the flag had a horizontal support rod, so it made it look wavy. And movement came from the astronauts twisting the pole, not the flag. So there's no atmosphere on the moon for it to blow.
Well, either that or someone forgot to turn the AC off in the movie.
Yeah,
set.
but if you look at the videos, it only moves
Yeah.
when they're moving it. As soon as they put it down, it stops.
Right, I've seen everything I've seen makes me think that it's stationary. Yeah.
So the next topic is there are no stars in the photos. What do you think about that?
No stars in the photos. Well, I think that it comes down to basic photography and exposure.
Yeah.
And
they,
light
they were like
sources and-
old
Yeah.
cameras
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah, it says right here the camera exposure was not for the was set for the bright of the lunar surface. And also stars are too dim to appear under those settings, just like stars cannot show up in daytime photos on Earth.
Right, I think that's definitely
Yeah.
fair. And if you're setting your exposure for
Right, you're setting
what you're
exposure for the
focusing
moon.
on, then yeah.
So next is point 4 is the shadows don't line up, so it must be studio lights.
Okay, I have seen some arguments about this before, and that is certainly something that can be taken into consideration because your main argument is going to be if you're in space, you have one primary light source, and that's going to be the sun's, therefore all shadows have to be going a certain way. However, there are going to be lights set up, which would be studio lights, but the counter argument of that would be that, the astronauts set up their own lighting sources
Right.
as well in order to better see whatever they were looking at. So that's one that I think you can definitely argue for it being faked, but at the same time has a strong argument countering that. Yeah.
What do you think about that, Lincoln?
I mean, I would even assume like the space, like the shuttle probably wasn't dark. There has to be
Probably.
lights on that or in it because like they left the door open. when they
Right.
walked.
Right.
There's
Not
other
to
light
mention-
sources that were at least there.
Wow. Oh, no, I just bumped my mic.
Yeah.
And not to mention all the reflective material on
Yeah.
Exactly.
the materials and stuff used. But I'm making the argument that it's studio lights.
Yeah.
I
Because
guess I don't know much about that.
You know a lot
I'm
about
not
studio
too-
lights. You know all about studio lights doing a bunch of film. What would be, what situation would this be where the shadows wouldn't line up in the studio lights and stuff like that?
Okay, well, you'd look at it in terms of dramatic effect. And generally speaking, most images of the moon are like strong one source lighting. But when you do look at certain images of it, there is a little bit of dramatic element put to it. And, that is only going to be created by somebody that either has an artistic eye for photography in a natural environment or someone with an artistic eye under a controlled environment. And I don't know if any of the astronauts were amateur or, kind of like borderline professional photographers
They're
to take
perfectionists.
some of those images the way that they did, especially with everything else that they had to consider. I mean, there are certainly dramatic angles. There's a few images with dramatic lighting. And the counter argument would be the sun is such a bright source that the intensity of the light to counter it, to create some of the shadows, would have to be more than the astronauts
Right.
would be able to produce on their own.
Well, they're not astronauts. They're professional actors.
Well,
So a theory that debunks the shadows is uneven lunar terrain and perspective distort the shadow angles. And the sun was single light source and its effect normal in a wide angle photography.
that's true, yeah.
So the next theory is the Van Allen radiation belts will kill the astronauts.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know enough about it, honestly.
That radiation would kill them.
Yeah, that's
That there's a radiation barrier beyond the Earth's atmosphere that basically makes it impossible for any living organism to go so on beyond our atmosphere, including to the moon.
Well, I mean, even before we got to the moon, like we've shot stuff up there that
Right.
stayed alive. I guess maybe because it was still in a shuttle, but
Well, and that's part of the argument against it. If we've been to the moon, why have we spent the decades since barely floating around
Right.
outside of the gravitational pull.
Well,
The conspiracy theorists would say that we're trying to find a way through it. That's what we've been doing.
I
Yeah.
feel like the spacesuits kind of work as a radiation suit because think of all the padding and material
Yeah.
that's in them.
Well, yeah, but if you're talking about that radiation barrier in terms of conspiracy theory, it's so great that it's going to destroy anything that's organic.
Well, but we've shot stuff up there that stays
Exactly.
alive.
Yeah,
Like,
but how far up, Lincoln? You know what I mean? Like, that's what they're saying. The barrier is beyond the general atmosphere. So this conspiracy theory says that there's like a kind of like a buffer, of zero gravity just beyond the atmosphere before the barrier, and that's where we play around on space shuttles and the space station and all of that.
and the Earth is flat.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, yes. And, the ocean just falls off the sides,
Yeah.
and aliens live in Antarctica.
It's like a Zen ocean. It just kind of keeps perpetually going.
Yes.
So
I do not believe that, by the way.
he does. He just want to say it publicly. So the debunking it is the spaceship passed through the belts quickly, and radiation exposure was low well within safe limits.
Well, that and whatever the material is
Yeah.
made of would be taking that into account, yeah.
So the last final point is no blast crater under the lunar module.
No blast crater. Well, okay, yeah, that'd be a point.
So what do you think?
So I
about
think
that?
that'd be a Lincoln question.
Yeah,
Like,
what do you
there's
think?
there's not a crater
There's no
left there?
crater underneath it.
I mean, Grant, I don't know how the technology works. Is there I've only seen them like getting out of the shuttle. Is
There's
there a video of
thrusters
them
when it
land?
comes down. When it
There's-
comes down, there's thrusters to slow it down, so it kind of like gently.
Well, then those would just be
Lands.
on the ground covering it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, or like we were talking about, like the lighting before. Maybe you just can't see it.
Well, I would make in Lincoln's case, I'm not doing a very good job of playing the conspiracy theorist here. In Lincoln's case, I don't think that the power would be enough to create a crater.
Yeah.
Like you could argue that you should be able to see some kind of disruption in terms of, the dust and all that on the moon, but there wouldn't be enough of a pushback to actually
Right.
create a crater.
Because also with the zero gravity, I feel like.
Oh, yeah,
Be
that'd
a lot.
all come in part of it as well, yeah.
Yeah, so the two things that debunked it is the descent engine was on low throttle and the move gravity is weak, so no larger crater would form.
Yeah.
So overall, no credible evidence supports the idea the moon landing was faked, and multiple independent lines of proof, physical samples, tracking data, modern images of landing sites confirm it happened.
Well, that's why I said, Jesse, I am not someone that says it didn't happen, but I am someone who would not be even remotely surprised. And my reasons are very, very, very simple. We had a martyred president at the heart of the Cold War. We had to, and I do not put it past the United States government to cut corners
I
in
can agree with- I
that
can
kind of
agree with that.
situation.
What do you think about
Yes.
Lincoln?
I mean, I completely agree with what Swanson said. A lot of my family members think that it didn't happen, so I have to argue with them a lot on that. And it's crazy that you can provide all the evidence to disprove something
Yeah.
that someone's going to say, and they don't change.
Yeah, I think that's probably the more interesting conversation to be had, right? I mean, if you
Right.
look at it objectively and factually, it does land in favor of it happening, right? And there are some compelling arguments to make you think, right? When you look at certain images and certain questions, and they can be debunked, and some of them have a little more solid grounding to debunk them than others. In my view, yeah, you can explain these things away, but only to a point. It doesn't 100% cover every aspect of it. I think the more interesting conversation is in the social political implications of whether it happened or whether it didn't happen, right? If it didn't happen, we were supposed to be, the democratic leader of the world in the Cold War against the evils of communism, and we were losing. And we basically, and that opens up a whole another gate. Did we kill
Yeah.
Kennedy as a country ourselves or not? You know what I mean? But regardless, from the American public's point of view, and by extension the Western world's point of view, you had a martyred president, one of the most popular in history, make the promise during the height of the Cold War, which we were losing. Not the
Yeah.
Cold War in terms of military, but we were losing the space race. Don't ever forget that. Russia was kicking us in the late 50s through the early 60s in the space race. So we are very much, because of Kennedy's statement, in a situation where we had no choice. We had to do it.
Right.
You
We
know
had
what
to
I
get on
mean?
the
We
moon.
had to do it, because if we did not, then we look weak compared to Russia, and all the social political implications that go along with that kind of flood around with it. And we were basically in a position where we had too.
Right.
And the argument as to why I can't say I would be surprised is we literally pulled it out at the 11th hour. You know what I mean? And the social political implications, had we not, history would be entirely
Right.
different. You know, like the American people would have lost faith. Not that they didn't after Vietnam and Watergate and all that stuff anyway, but, you know, like faith would have been lost in the government. Faith would have been lost in the United States as a country. The West would have been critically injured. Communism would have gained a foothold, and yada, 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 and it would have been parallel to all these different things. And then, you know, that would have been swung into like faith and belief in military might.
Right.
Because if you can go to the moon, then your military obviously must be able to do anything that you claim that it can do. And I do believe that our history would have gone down differently. I don't know if it would have gone down drastically differently, but I do truly believe that the history between the United States and Russia, i.e. the West and communist East, would have been very, very different throughout the 1970s and 80s.
So while we're on the talk of space and space travel, what do you think about us going to Mars?
I think Elon can do whatever Elon wants. And nobody's going to stop him.
I mean, yeah, no one can stop
Yeah.
him. I think we could just, you know, focus on making Earth good instead of leaving. But
I do agree with that. I do very much support the human nature to explore and to expand. You know what I mean? And I think it's kind of been wrapped up into this idea of colonialism, which colonialism definitely was an aspect of that. But I do think there's something to be said about the human nature and the human drive to explore and to reach places we haven't been before. And I think that's just an innate part of being human. So I fully support us getting off Earth and exploring and discovering and moving beyond. However, I do think there's more important things, more prevalent things.
Right.
You know, so I wouldn't say let's stop going to Mars, but I would say before we do that, what can we?
yeah,
you
or
know, like
let's get to Mars differently, because like I
Yeah.
know you said Elon, like he's all big into all the AI that's just polluting the Earth more and more, which gives us a reason to leave.
right,
But-
which is a very interesting argument and kind of takes us off Jesse's topic here. But when you talk about AI and the energy required for AI,
Yeah.
and you know, there's a lot of heat being thrown at Bill Gates right now, right? Because he's one of the biggest climate activists, and now all of a sudden he needs all this energy for AI. So he does. The climate's fine. Don't worry about it.
Did we find water on Mars? I thought that was a proven thing. We found water.
We found traces,
Yes.
that it once had oceans.
Yeah.
So I think there might be some sort of oxygen on Mars.
Well, there's a movie from when I was a little younger than you guys, and which is really weird because I just turned 30.
Yeah.
But it's called Total Recall, and it's a Schwarzenegger movie. It might have been remade, actually. I can't remember. But the whole idea is they're terraforming Mars, you know, and it's kind of like corporate greed, air and water controlled. And the idea is at the end of the movie, there's these like radical rebels that are basically just freeing the natural process and allowing it to continue. So I'm of the mind that Mars once very much supported life. I'm not saying green men Martians or anything like that, but I do believe that Mars once had an ecosystem that was supportive of life.
So to close it all out, what do you think of space? What do you think the road to space travel is going to be like in the next decade?
I do truly believe that within my lifetime, so most certainly within your lifetime, we'll have a colony on Mars. And I think that's coming whether we want it or not. You know, I think that's coming regardless of anybody's opinion on it. I just think too many powerful people with the resources want it to happen, and the technology is certainly there. Of course, we need to get to the moon before we can get to Mars, Lincoln.
Yeah,
I just want to
or
throw that out there.
Maybe we'll get to a movie set that looks like Mars.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I hear you eat poop potatoes with Matt Damon
Well,
if you,
you see the
live
green
on Mars.
screens with the Marvel movies and everything. So
Yeah, but they didn't have green screens like
Yeah.
that in the 60s. That's why Stanley Kubrick is Stanley Kubrick. Best movie ever made, The Moon Landing.
So what do you think, Lincoln, about space travel in the next decade?
I mean, I agree that we'll definitely get to Mars, as much as I don't want us to, but I guess that's inevitable. There's nothing,
Yeah.
nothing that I can do.
If you
to stop
if
it.
you look at technology, right, and again, if you go back and consider the idea, and this is an argument as to why we probably did land on the moon, right? One of the counter arguments I gave was the Chris Rock joke. You mean to tell me we could at the time. This was like in the early 2000s. You know, like 50 years ago, we could build a space shuttle fly to the moon, but you can't build a Pinto where the bumper doesn't fall off. But when you look at it in the context of we had to get there because it was the Cold War, you know what I mean? Like, that was our goal. That was our only goal. We probably jumped way more things than we should have, which is
Right.
why we've been floating around in space shuttles and the space station ever since, because that's the stuff we probably should have done before we went to the moon in the first place. I do think that it's very reasonable that we took a gamble and won, you know, but again, the social political reasons are why I can't say I would be surprised if it came out tomorrow. We took a social political gamble and won, and I think we've been doing everything since to kind of fill in the gap that we kind of skimmed
Right.
through and got lucky, basically skimming through. And if you look at how technology, even in your lifetime, right? Like I know I don't look a day over 30, but I'm actually a Gen Xer, late Gen Xer. I'm technically a Xennial. That's late Gen Xer, let me know. But if you look at technology even over your lifetime, the way it jumps is phenomenal. I'm going to sound like an old man here, but
Yeah.
you know, I was a teenager. I got my driver's license before I had an email address. And one of my ex-girlfriends somehow knew I got my driver's license. No cell phones, no emails. I have no idea. There's literally no way Michelle could have found out I got my driver's license, but she called me up. Hey, heard you passed your test today. You should pick me up. I go, oh, okay. You know, and now you just look at your lives since you were in elementary school to now with phones and all of that stuff. Technology is just going exponentially. And then you throw AI into it. And then there's all these arguments, you know, saying we're worrying about AI when we should really be worrying about quantum computing, right? And this is all just going to compound and go so much faster and faster and faster and faster. So I truly believe there'll be a colony, a human colony on Mars within my
Right.
lifetime. Within your lifetime,
That's
we could be like on a moon at Jupiter or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's coming. I do believe it's coming, and I do think there's a lot to be said about the human spirit for exploration. You know, I am a Star Wars fanatic, but you know, to me, I have enough love in my heart for Star Wars and Star Trek, so I do appreciate Star Trek and that whole notion. And you know, I agree with Gene Roddenberry's vision of humanity and space and the future and bringing the best of us out and all that kind of thing. But I do think the very real thing that we're looking at, and I think it's going to be something that impacts your generation more than mine, is at the expense of what?
Right.
But like we said before, it's coming. It's definitely going to be coming.
Lincoln, do you have any closing remarks about anything we talked about today?
I don't think so.
Swanson?
I think I pretty much covered it
Yeah.
up. But, you know, I mean, you would question it, but, I mean, seriously, the Red Hot Chili Peppers told us in a song, space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement.
Well, thank you, Lincoln. Thank
Oh.
you, Swanson, for joining me today. And this was the JDI experience about the moon landing, and I'll see you in the next episode of the podcast, man.